Okay, today we are going over the respiratory system. So we're going to go over some of the structures and functions of the respiratory system and also the purpose of it, which is to get oxygen into your cells and get CO2 out of your body. So we'll start with our question of the day. Why don't your lungs collapse when you breathe out? And we'll be able to answer that in just a few minutes. So in the pre-lecture assignment, what you need to know here is the order. So if oxygen is coming in, it's going to go in this order from top to bottom. And if carbon dioxide is going out, it's going to go from bottom to top. So you might be asked on the test a question like, you're breathing oxygen in, it has reached the larynx, what structure is it going to come across next? So things like that. So looking at some of the anatomy here, when you breathe in, the first thing oxygen will encounter is either the nasal cavity or the pharynx, also known as the throat. I don't think I can zoom in on that very well, but pharynx is right in here. And the next stop is the larynx, and this is where your voice box is and your vocal cords, as you can see here. And so on our picture, the larynx is right here. So in through the nose to the pharynx, down to the larynx. And then you have something called the epiglottis. And I don't think it's pictured here, but it's the flap of tissue that prevents food from passing into the larynx. So when you swallow your food, obviously it goes through the pharynx. You don't want it to go down your trachea into your lungs. And so when you swallow food, the epiglottis will actually flap closed to block off the trachea so food doesn't get into your lungs. And then we have the trachea, sometimes called the windpipe. If you fill your throat and rub up and down those little bumps that you can feel or ridges are your trachea. And this is going to connect the larynx to the primary bronchi. So in the picture here, this is your trachea. And then you have the bronchi. Single for that is bronchus, and you have two that branch off here to go into the lungs. And then you have bronchioles, which are located in the lungs, all these little branches here. And then each bronchiole is going to lead to an elongated space with air pockets or sacs called alveoli. And that's where the exchange of oxygen and CO2 happens. So make sure you know this order and that you know basically what the function of each of these are. So we're going to start here with the trachea. The trachea is lined by epithelial cells, and based on what we already know, if we look at this, what type of epithelial cell is it? So if we look at this, you have some cells that are like peekabooing out. So remember that's pseudostratified. So they are pseudostratified epithelium. And they contain cilia. So if you look at this picture here, these are the cilia, and they help to sweep things out of the respiratory system that aren't supposed to be there. Like this little particle here, they'll sweep them out. And the goblet cells, what a name, I'm assuming because they're kind of shaped like goblets, secrete mucus. And this is also going to do things like help trap dirt and particles that shouldn't be in your respiratory system so they can be swept out and coughed out. So debris is captured and swept out. Mucus traps particles and cilia move them up and out. And we call this the mucociliary escalator because that's just what it sounds like. You've got the mucus, you've got the cilia, sweeping these things up and out of the respiratory system. Okay, so alveoli are the bronchioles will terminate at the alveolar sacs, and if you look here, they're kind of little grape-like structures, and those are the alveoli. It's the site of gas exchange. So where you're wanting to bring oxygen in to the body and the blood, and you're wanting to exhale the CO2 out. The surface area of these, you've got over 300 million of these alveoli in your lungs, and if you were to open them up and spread them out, it would be the size of a tennis court, which was also used as a reference for the small intestine. So apparently you've got a whole bunch of tennis courts stuffed inside you. But what happens is you breathe in oxygen gas. This will end up at the alveoli, which lead to the capillaries. And then to the tissues where your cells are, so they can take that oxygen in for, you guessed it, cellular respiration. So remember, oxygen gas is the final electron receptor that is necessary for cellular respiration, so you can make ATP. That's why you breathe the oxygen in, and why you've got to get it to your cells is so you can make ATP. Your cells can make energy. And the reverse cycle, the CO2, is a byproduct or waste product of cellular respiration. And so you're going to have CO2 from the tissues that will go to the capillaries, which will go to the alveoli, and then you breathe it out. So the inner lining of these alveoli contains something called surfactant. And it does a couple of things, so let's write this down first. It lowers the surface tension of the water that lines the alveoli. And this prevents alveolar collapse. So let's draw a single alveoli. So it's kind of this grape shape like this, and it's lined with water molecules. And if you remember our lesson on water, water has this property called cohesion, where it wants to stick to other water molecules. And so these alveolar sacs have a tendency to collapse on themselves because those water molecules want to be together. So this brings us to the question of the day. Why don't your lungs collapse when you breathe out? It's because of this surfactant. And it has some of the same properties as like soap or dish soap. And so just to get back to the question here, alveoli are small bubbles lined with water molecules like we've drawn here. And these water molecules are attracted to one another, creating a tension that wants to collapse the bubble from the inside. Surfactant is lipid-based. So coating the water molecules in surfactant takes this tension caused by the water molecules wanting to form bonds away. This is why when you breathe out, the water molecules don't bond together and collapse your alveoli. Surfactant is formed later in gestation, so premature babies need ventilators that not only force open the alveoli, but add surfactant as well to help the alveoli from collapsing. So babies don't start developing their own surfactant until the very last part of the pregnancy. I think it's after like 36 weeks. So if a baby is premature, they'll have to, that's why they're often on a ventilator because they haven't produced this surfactant. And so their alveoli, the water molecules want to attract to each other and their lungs will collapse without the pressure from the ventilator. And I don't know if it's like gaseous surfactant or what they're putting in there. But yeah, so surfactant is lipid-based. How can I shorten this? And this takes attention of water molecules wanting to form bonds away. So your alveoli don't collapse. So we don't want this. So when these get coated with this surfactant, the water molecules are no longer wanting to adhere to each other and the alveoli stay open. All right, so gas exchange. And students really seem to struggle with this page, and there will be information from this on the exam. So remember, when you breathe in oxygen, you want to get it to your cells. And then you want to take the CO2, the carbon dioxide, from your cells and breathe it out. So the gases diffuse from high pressure to low pressure through simple diffusion, so from high to low. And both oxygen and CO2 behave in this way. So we're going to kind of look at two different things. Let's look at oxygen first. So we'll focus on this side. So in your lungs, you've just inhaled and you've breathed in oxygen into your alveolus here. Oh, that's the singular alveolus. I was trying to think of it. And so you're going to have the oxygen gas levels be high. And in your cells, the oxygen gas levels are going to be low because as soon as that oxygen gets in there, it's going to be used for cellular respiration. So at the alveoli, it's going to diffuse from high to low from the alveolus into your red blood cells. This happens in the lungs, and then they'll go through a pulmonary vein to the heart. The heart will pump it to all of your different tissues, and your oxygen gas at the tissues. So here's the capillary, and here is your, this is the tissue. And this is the capillary with the red blood cell. So it just came from up here. So it's going to have oxygen gas at high levels. And at your tissues, the oxygen gas will be low. And so again, it goes from high to low. It's going to go from that red blood cell into your tissues and cells so it can be used for cellular respiration. Okay, so just to repeat that, you breathe in your lungs so the oxygen concentration and pressure is high, and you've got these red blood cells that have already dropped off their oxygen, so their oxygen levels are low. So it's going to go from high to low, go to the heart, get pumped out to the rest of the body and your tissues where the oxygen is low because it's all been used for cellular respiration. And now that that has picked up the oxygen from the lungs, it has a high oxygen, and it's going to go from high to low into the tissues. All right, let's look at this other side, carbon dioxide. So at the alveoli in the lungs, you're going to have the CO2 of the red blood cells be high because they have just picked that up from the tissues and taken it to the lungs. And in the alveolus, the CO2 will be low. So always going from high to low, it's going to drop off that CO2 to the alveolus and you will exhale it out. I should have actually started down here at the tissues, but it's fine. So at the tissues, in the artery, or in your tissue, which is right here, two S's there, your carbon dioxide is going to be high because you're producing all of that CO2 waste as a result of cellular respiration, and the CO2 in the red blood cell is going to be low because over here it dropped off, so the CO2 will be low, and so it's going to go from high to low. So the CO2 will go into the red blood cells, and then from the tissues into the heart, it will get pumped to the lungs. The red blood cells will drop it off, and you will exhale it. So for this page, what you need to know, first of all, just remember the gas is diffused from high to low. And then if you're shown one of these pictures, that you can say like which direction the oxygen would flow or which direction the CO2 would go. All right, transport of oxygen. So this is more so just informational. I don't think any questions from this page are on the exam, so it's not like a need to know but nice to know type thing. So most oxygen in the blood is carried by hemoglobin. So that's a protein made up of 4 parts. I'm just making squiggles here to show that. And a protein made up of 4 parts, remember, is quaternary. So with protein structure, you have primary, secondary, tertiary, and quaternary. And so hemoglobin is a quaternary protein. So it's a macromolecule. Put quaternary. Located in red blood cells. And get used to red blood cells being abbreviated as RBCs, because that's how it's going to be the rest of forever. And what it does is it binds with oxygen and some carbon dioxide. So it's a carrier for these gases that we need to get in and out of our bodies. So at the alveoli, oxygen is breathed in and diffuses from the alveoli to the blood. And when the hemoglobin is not carrying oxygen, we call it deoxyhemoglobin. And then once it picks up the oxygen, we call it oxyhemoglobin. So at the body tissues, oxygen needed by the cells diffuses from the blood to the tissue. And so that oxyhemoglobin is going to drop off its oxygen to the tissues and the cells, and then you're left with deoxyhemoglobin, not carrying any oxygen. For the transport of CO2, carbon dioxide is transported in 3 ways. So most of it is converted to bicarbonate ion in your red blood cells. And this happens with the help of an enzyme called carbonic anhydrase. So that's what happens to most of that. We'll talk about that in a second. And some will bind to hemoglobin. That protein in your red blood cells. And a little bit of it will dissolve into the blood plasma. So why doesn't your blood bubble like soda? So soda has carbon dioxide in it, which is what makes it fizzy. Your blood at times is full of carbon dioxide, so why isn't it bubbly? Thank goodness it's not, because I think we'd have a lot more vampire type situations drinking, like, I'm just picturing a really thick, like dirty Dr. Pepper if your blood was bubbly. I don't know. But if any more CO2 was dissolved in the plasma, the blood would bubble like soda. But luckily, it's just a little bit that dissolves there. And at the body tissues, carbon dioxide from cellular respiration diffuses from the tissues to the blood. And then in the lungs, at the alveoli, the carbon dioxide exhaled out diffuses from the blood to the alveoli. So you can breathe it out. So this, let's see if I can zoom in on that at all. Oh yeah, there we go. Is this the one we've seen? No, oh wait. We've seen one of these. So with carbon dioxide and water, with the help of the catalyst or enzyme carbonic anhydrase, will form carbonic acid. And yes, we've seen this, which will break down into hydrogen ions and bicarbonate ions. And then those hydrogen ions and bicarbonate ions form carbonic acid. So we're kind of going backwards here. With carbonic anhydrase, they form water and CO2. So anyway, don't have to know this, but the point of this is that the carbon dioxide is converted to this bicarbonate ion. So you don't have, it's just a way to get the CO2 out of your tissues and your cells. So it's kind of a short one today, not too bad. So if you have any questions, let me know, and I hope you guys have a great day.